Hi, I'm Josh, and I want to talk to you about why I love old school tabletop RPGs and share some tips for people who want to be players in old school games. First off, let me say that I'm not an edition warrior. I don't think that there's any kind of pure D&D, and that every version, every other version that's not this pure D&D is some kind of heresy against St. Gygax and St. Artisan. I started playing Advanced Dungeons & Dragons back when I was a kid with 2nd edition. I played tons of 5th edition and lots of most of the other editions. They've all got something for everybody, and they're all fun for what they are. But lately I've gotten really into going back to my old school roots. Even farther back than when I first started, with original D&D from 1974, Holmes Basic from 1977, and Basic and Expert, or BX, from 1981. Lately, I've been running a retroclone of the old 1981 Basic and Expert rules by Moldvay, Cook, and Marsh. We've been using Old School Essentials Advanced Fantasy by Gavin Norman from Necrotic Gnome. This takes the old BX rules from 81 and adds some options taken from 1978's AD&D, and cleans up the rules and makes them more usable at the table and more accessible to modern gamers. Anyway, I'm running a module right now called In the Shadow of Tower Silveraxe. It's by Jacob Fleming. It's an awesome low-level adventure with all the fixins. It's got wilderness hex crawl exploration, lots of dungeons, a town the party can use as a base, some weird history, a compelling villain with its own plans. It's a really great sandbox setting where the PCs can explore and do their thing. My players are mostly relatively new. Some have played some 5e, some played D&D back when I was starting but haven't played in decades, and some haven't played any tabletop RPGs at all. So that's a lot of varied experience and expectations coming to the table to navigate, and while everyone's having a great time, I think there's also some frustrations and erroneous expectations that I didn't do a good job of dealing with in session 0. There are a lot of videos on how to run old school games out there, and a couple of really good texts that you can read, especially the quick primer on, to old school gaming and Principia Apocrypha, which are like manifestos of the old school Renaissance. But there's not much out there to help players who want to do, on what they need to do or what they need to expect, how to relate even to old school RPGs, especially not videos. So I wanted to make a quick video to share some tips I have for players, especially new players and players coming from modern RPGs who want to try out old school games. So number 1, learn the rules. Old school games tend to be pretty minimalist. They're rules light systems for the most part. Most of them only have a few pages of core rules. If you look at the old school Essentials Advanced Fantasy Player's Tome, it's 250 pages, but most of that is reference material. The core rules of the game are only about 30 digest-sized pages worth of material. I won't belabor the point, but if you take the time to learn the rules, you'll find that you have a better sense of what to expect, what the design principles of the game are, and what the game expects from you as a player. Everything that happens is going to make a lot more sense. Number 2, engage with the design principles of the game. Every rule system has expectations built into the way it's written, and its design principles encourage and discourage different things. In D&D, we talk about 3 pillars of the game: social interaction, exploration, and combat. And different editions of D&D prioritize these 3 pillars differently. Most of the rules in 5e are built around an emphasis on tactical combat. There are some rules for social interaction with skills, and for exploration, you'll probably just have to wing it. Old school games are practically the opposite. The game's mostly built around exploration and social interaction, with procedures for wilderness and dungeon exploration, an expectation that players will use roleplay and description in lieu of having skills, and mechanics to quickly and efficiently resolve combat. The game rewards experience points for gold, for treasure that you recover from your adventures, and combat is deadly. Monsters don't carry a lot of treasure, so if you want to level up and advance your character, the way to do that is to be cautious, be prepared, avoid unnecessary battles, and get in there and get away with the loot. This approach is baked into the design principles of the game, and if you lean into that, you'll find that things fall into place better. 3. Embrace emergent gameplay. Emergent gameplay is a huge part of old school games. Modern players may be coming from the idea of carefully planned character builds, and that's cool, but that's not what's going to happen in these games. Character creation is more random and much more of an act of discovery. You'll discover who your character is as you roll their stats and figure out what kind of thing they're suited for. Embrace that. It'll challenge you to play things you might otherwise not play, or to find creative and interesting ways to play them. Much of the game is like this. There are lots of random tables, wandering monster charts, randomly generated treasure, and things like that. And if everyone embraces this, you can really get into the fun of improvising and thinking about fun and interesting ways to fit this procedurally generated world together. That doesn't mean that there can't be a narrative, but that narrative may have more surprises than you come to expect. To me, it makes the world seem like it's more alive. There's there's not an overarching narrative that's going to tell the story either. That's going to come out as the players explore and interact with the world. It's going to emerge as well. 4. Live your backstory and become a hero. A level 1 old school PC is not very formidable. One hit from almost any attack can very likely kill you dead. Like dead. When you were creating your character, you discovered them more than built them. Now take the same approach to your background. Before you set out on this adventure, you were a nobody, and now you're on the path to gold and glory by sword and spell. You weren't born a hero, but you have the chance to become one. That's not to say don't have any kind of backstory. Have a sense of where your character came from and from what motivates them, but the good part starts now. When you think about a beloved character from a past game, you don't fondly remember the cool things that happened in their backstory. You remember the parts you were there for, the parts that happened in the game together with your friends. 5. Don't be limited by your character sheet. Modern gamers tend to look at their character sheet for solutions to problems they face. What skill can I roll for that? What power or feat will let me do the thing I want to do? Well, old school games are pretty rules light, and your character sheet doesn't have very much on it. So there aren't any skills or feats and not much in the way of powers and abilities. You got into adventuring because you didn't want to be a peasant anymore. You're not a superhero. You're not even a hero yet. But you can be if you're quick-witted and resourceful. The lack of rules doesn't limit you. It frees you. If you want to do something, just tell the GM what you want to do. If there's not a rule for how to resolve it, then they'll make a ruling on how to make it work. You can try to do anything you can imagine. Literally anything. Your chances of success may vary. Look at your dice with dread and trepidation and find ways to avoid rolling them if you can. 6. Ask questions. So, if the answer to your problems isn't on your character sheet, then where is it? It's all around you in your environment. Ask questions about everything. Try to visualize things as if you're there. Once you understand your environment, you may find that there are all kinds of things around you that could either help or be a hindrance to you. But you have to investigate and explore your environment. And the way to do that is to ask questions about it. There aren't any perception checks or investigation checks. You just have to ask questions and figure it out. Does the door open in or out? What does the floor look like? Do I smell anything here? How tall are the trees? Try to find things in your environment that you can use to your advantage. Old school games require you to think outside of the box, so make sure to look around and get a good idea of what's outside of your box. 7. be prepared. Be prepared. It's really kind of a joke that in modern games, everyone can see in the dark. The dungeon master starts to describe the pitch dark corridor ahead, and everybody's just like, oh yeah, I have dark vision. In old school games, you're going to need to bring torches. Time and encumbrance are tracked. That's not to create unnecessary bookkeeping, but to put pressure on the adventurers. As they go deeper into the dungeon, their light sources are burned up. Their food is eaten. How far can they go before they run out of torches or run out of food? How will they get the treasure they find back to their base? Resource management is part of old school games to create tension and problems for the players to solve. You brought all this heavy gold back to town from the dungeon. Okay, what are you going to do with it? It's too heavy to carry around, and some folks were definitely watching you suspiciously when you came in. You've got it. Now you have to make a plan to keep it. That's one part of being prepared, but you can do better. You can ask around about what kind of dangers in the area, when monsters tend to attack, where. You can do reconnaissance and try to get an edge on what you're facing. You can even hire retainers to help you fight. The game has mechanics for this, and it's actually really important. Another one of the game's expectations of you is that you'll hire people to help you. It's essential to your survival. But the more prepared you are, the more you'll find you can punch above your weight class, and the more likely survival will be. I'll give you an example of what I mean from my Silveraxe campaign, which will bring me to the next point anyway. 8. Treat combat like warfare, not a sport. Old school games don't really like balanced encounters. Combat is super dangerous, and you'll never get anywhere if you have to make a new character every other session. This has been a hard lesson for my group. So far, we've played 4 or 5 sessions, and we've had something like 4 character deaths, which means that person has to start over with no experience points. Life is cheap. People coming from modern games might not be expecting this. They're used to balanced encounters, death saves, relatively quick healing, and having a lot more hit points. That expectation will get you in trouble here. In modern games, combat is like a sport where both teams, the PCs and the monsters, are balanced, and if the PCs play well, then they'll probably win. In old school games, you're better off approaching combat as war. So let me tell you about my level 1 party and how they went to fight a troll. They heard that a farmer had been having trouble with a troll coming out of the forest near his ranch at night and killing his cows. It had killed a farmhand who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. The farmer needed the troll gone and was willing to pay a pretty penny to whoever could take care of it. So the party heard this, and probably assuming that because I told them this, it was a balanced encounter for their level, which, that's not necessarily true. They agreed to take on the task. They hired a few retainers to help them. They already learned some important things. The troll attacks at night, so it's probably nocturnal. It's an opportunistic killer. It likes man flesh, but will be satisfied by a cow. It comes from the forest over there and is easy to track. They debated some different approaches to the problem, and finally they decided that first they needed to track the troll back and recon its lair, which they find is about 3 miles away. They discovered that its lair is basically a small cave, less than 10 feet across, and that the troll has to sort of crawl in and out of this dark hole in the ground. One of the stealthier members of the party decides to sneak in and look around, but she woke up the troll and never came back out. The party fled back to the farm. I described the farm when they first arrived and said that there was a hay barn, so they asked the farmer if they could use his wagon to fill it with hay. He said yes, but if they lost the wagon or his mule, he'd deduct it from their pay. But he wanted the troll gone, so okay. Everyone knows trolls don't like fire, so they came back to its lair and filled the opening with the wagon full of hay. Then they doused that with their lamp oil. They put oil on the ground all around the opening. Then they positioned themselves at range and threw a torch on it. This filled the cave with smoke and smoked the troll out. He tore through the flaming hay, burning himself quite a bit. He was covered in burning oil and hay. Then they used their range attacks with bows, javelins, and crossbows, spread out so that he couldn't get to any group of them at once. He killed a couple of them before they took him down, but take him down they did. And they burned him and took his teeth back to show the farmer, who happily rewarded them for their service and told them about another problem he could use their help with. That's combat as war. They used every trick and every element of their environment that they could to get every advantage possible. They didn't want a balanced fight. They wanted a decisive victory. They knew that a troll could kill them if it was balanced. And at level 1, they took down a troll. It was absolutely epic, and I'll never forget it. Later, they went toe-to-toe with 4 skeletons in a dungeon, and it didn't go as well. They tried to have a relatively balanced fight, and they lost 2 PCs for pretty much nothing. Fight when you know you can win, and do everything possible to make that fight unbalanced in your favor. 9. This is the last point. Try not to die, but embrace defeat. I've already said life is cheap. It's very easy to die. You might be tempted to avoid getting too attached to your character. I want to discourage this approach. Get attached to your character. Let your attachment feed your fear and make you cautious. Let the loss of your character be something that will break your heart, and try to do everything you can think of to make sure your character survives their adventures. In Game of Thrones, Ned Stark said that you can only be brave if you're afraid. So be brave. Face the darkness, don't shun danger, but don't be foolish. Hire retainers to protect your character. If you're a squishy mage, then surround yourself with them. If you're going to be up front in the fray, buy the best armor you can. Be careful of traps and avoid fights you won't win or that you don't need to risk. Get in there, get what you came for, and get out with your life. But if you must die, die bravely and heroically, and let it be a fitting end to your character's story. So that's it. Those are my tips. I hope they make old school games sound fun and exciting, and I hope you try them if you haven't before. If you want to run an old school game, share this video with your players, and if you're playing in one, share it with the other players so you'll be more prepared. Then maybe you'll all live to reach level 2. Thanks for watching, and happy gaming.